And welcome to the Global Festival of Yoga, Celebrating Wellness. Today is our 25th day of the festival, and this is the third session of the day. So on behalf of Indica Yoga and all of Indica's partners, I'd like to offer you my warm pranams and welcome. My name is Hannah, and I work with the organization, the Global Peace Initiative of Women. We're an NGO based in New York City, and we're super excited to be partnering with Indica Yoga for this Festival of Yoga, which is now 40 days. So for those of you who are not familiar with Indica Yoga, Indica is a platform that offers inclusive and diverse forms of yoga that is authentic, immersive, and transformative. And today we have an excellent panel discussion on yoga, Dharma, and economic well-being. Often spirituality and prosperity aren't spoken about in the same sentence. However, they are inextricably linked. And today we have several amazing panelists who work at this intersection of Dharma, yoga, and economic well-being. We have Prashant Singh, Manish Jain, and Swami Atmarupananda. So I'd like to invite all of the discussants and moderators to come on the screen whenever you can. And this panel will also be co-hosted by GPIW, as you know. And I also would like to just take a moment to introduce you to my colleagues at GPIW. We have Marianne Marstrand, who is our Director of Operations, and she does so much amazing work behind the scenes. She's been helping so much for this whole festival. So I'd like to welcome Marianne, and I'd also like to welcome Dina Miriam, who is moderating this discussion, and she's also our founder and the author of 3 books, My Journey Through Time, The Untold Story of Sita, and When the Bright Moon Rises. So Dina, off to you to welcome our panelists. Thanks.
Namaskar, namaskar. This is an important discussion, and I must say it's a growing interest of mine. I have no background at all in economic matters, and yet we can't evolve to the next stage of human development unless we evolve an economy that works for all and that is based on well-being, human well-being, as well as ecological well-being. So I think we need to increasingly bring the economic thinking into our spiritual discussions. So I'm very pleased we're going to begin this discussion with Swami Atmarupananda, who I've known for a long time, who's been a colleague and an important part of GPIW for many, many years. Swamiji was born in America. He discovered the Vedanta tradition and Hinduism as a teenager and joined the Ramakrishna order as a monk in 1969 at the age of 19. And he spent many years in India engaged in monastic, scholarly, and spiritual training. Altogether, he spent 14 years in India, 36 years working for the order in America. He's now the head of the center in Houston, Texas. He travels around the world speaking on so many subjects. We've brought Swamiji to so many forums. He's come with us many times to the United Nations climate summits, where we try to bring a spiritual perspective to the climate and ecological crisis. So he's a very key, close member of GPIW, and I'm happy now to turn to Swamiji to begin the discussion on how we can reshape the economy so that it's based on well-being and Dharmic principles. Swamiji?
Thank you, Dina, and greetings to everyone. Namaste, namaskar to all. Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha, Om Rishi Bhyo Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Sarvastarutu Durgani, Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu, Sarva Sadbuddhim Apnotu, Sarva Sarvatra Nandatu. May all beings everywhere cross over difficulties. May all see that which is noble and uplifting. May all attain to that which is good. May all everywhere rejoice in the truth. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. I need to begin by saying I am not an economist. One of my teachers, one of my gurus, told me long back, 45 years ago, I think, he told me that when you speak or when you write in the future, always speak or write about that which you know. And so I'm not going to speak as a professional economist because I am not one. But I am an informed person who is interested in the larger welfare of humanity, which includes their economic welfare. So I'm going to speak from the standpoint of someone who is not a professional economist, not a trained economist, but someone who has looked at the economy and looked at the human situation from the larger picture, not from a detailed picture of economic policy. So first I thought that I should talk about some of the contradictions in our present economic system, because if we want to move to a dharmic economy, we need to know what the problems of the present economy are. Why should we move? Of course, we all recognize the inequalities in modern life, which are only growing. Here in America, the inequalities have become practically unsustainable. The middle class is disappearing. We still have a middle class, but it is disappearing in America. And so let me just briefly mention some of the problems that are in the present economic system. So first of all, where does our economic system come from? Where do we get our economic system? The economic systems don't grow on trees. They're not just a part of nature. Economic activity, transactional activity, that is natural to human society. That is in all societies. But the particular economic system we have is based on stories we have told ourselves. Stories about who we are, stories about what this world is, stories about who other people are, what society is, what is of value, what is not of value, what my responsibilities to society are, what society's responsibilities to me are. And so all of that is based on stories that we have told ourselves over generations. And it's important to remember that because it's based on stories, if we want to change the economy, eventually we need to change the story. That is, if it's a fundamental change, not just minor adjustments, a fundamental change needs to be a change of story. And that's where Dharma comes in. Changing the story to one which is in tune with Dharma. So one of the obvious contradictions in the present economic system is that it is based on the necessity, not the wish, the necessity for continual growth. The present system, as it is structured, dies in the absence of growth. And so it's based on the idea that growth has to continue. That's because of the way that we have conceived of money. The way that money is created. It's created on this, it's created out of debt. It's not created on the basis of wealth, it's created out of debt. And then that debt has to be paid for, it has to be paid with interest. And so there's the system that we have. It's not the system that humanity has always had, it's a modern system. It's based on the need for continual growth. And without growth, as I said, the system dies. But what do you get with continual growth in a finite system? The world is a finite system. You come up against the natural limitations of the system. And that's one of the things that we're facing now, the natural limitations of the wealth creation and the possibility of wealth creation within the world. People have been warning of this for centuries, at least for a couple of centuries, but we have created much more wealth than people ever thought possible. And so some people think, well, that'll just continue happening. It can't continue happening, not because I say so, not because a book says so, not because economists say so, but because it's in the nature of things that you cannot have infinite growth in a finite system. So we need to find, in a dharmic economy, we need to find a way of having an economy which values stasis, which is not dependent on continual expansion. Another problem is the destruction of the commons. The commons means that those resources in a society, in a nation, or in the world, which are there for the common good. Air, of course, is there. We don't charge people for their breathing. We don't have a meter on people's mouths and nose to charge them for how much their air they're using. Water, but water has been commoditized. Land has been commoditized. It used to be that in all societies, that there were forests and rivers and lakes which were there for the public use. You could go to harvest medicinal plants, go to harvest food. Those who hunted could go and hunt, fish, etc. But the commons have been reduced now to where the only commons left, practically speaking, is air and public parks. Otherwise, everything, including water, has been commoditized. So that's another problem. Because we've run out of things to commoditize. And that is why nations like China and the United States and other big countries are in a rush to buy up resources all around the world because we're running out of available resources. So the commoditization. And then the many other things I could mention as contradictions in the present system. I won't go on more now because my time is almost up for this part of the program. But let me talk about a dharmic economy. A dharmic economy, as I said, has to be based on a different story, the story of Dharma. And what is the basic principle of Dharma? The basic principle is the unity of existence, the unitary nature of existence. The reality is one, and everything, all of the diversity in this universe is based on that one. And so if my brother and sister are not just brother and sister, but are my own self, then if I take that principle and apply it to the economy, what comes out? That's what we have to figure out. And let me preface what I'm going to say, and then I'll close my opening remarks. That Swami Vivekananda, the great Vivekananda, he said that we have to bring the Vedanta, the truths of the Upanishads, out of the forest and into the marketplace. Into the marketplace means into practical everyday life. And so this discussion we're having today is part of that process, bringing the principles of spirituality out of the forest retreats, out of the ashramas, and into the marketplace. So, dharmic economy. It has to be based on the recognition of an underlying unity, which in social terms and economic terms means that all of us are connected, and therefore all of us have a mutual responsibility. It's not enough to have a system where whoever can grab the biggest piece gets to run away with it and enjoy it and leave others hungry. No, we have to recognize a shared responsibility, that the well-being of others is my own well-being. Again, the principle of Dharma, and I'll end with this because it's a good place to end. There's much, much more that I could say both on the problems and on the solution, but let me turn it over to others after saying this. That the basic thing to remember in a dharmic economy is that that Dharma is based on the recognition of unity. That's why the law of karma works. That's why there's a moral component to the universe, impersonal moral component to the universe, because when I hurt others outside of myself, I'm hurting myself. And so the new dharmic economy has to recognize that. So I'll close my opening remarks with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji. It's clear that the current system is based on a principle of competition rather than collaboration. But nature works in collaboration. All parts of the system work together to sustain to sustain the system. If they were fighting each other, the system would collapse, which is what we're seeing now. And so, I mean, that's a fundamental shift in thinking, this competition to collaboration. All right, well, let's hear next from Prashant Singh. Prashant is someone who we haven't worked with yet at GPIW, but we're very much looking forward to hearing your thoughts, Prashant, and to developing a relationship with you and between you and GPIW. Prashant is the president of the Center for Innovation and Governance at Rashtram School of Public Leadership, Rishihood University. He worked in the areas of technology, management, entrepreneurship, innovation, and strategy. He works with several initiatives in education, Ayurveda, and Artha as a basis for integral and sustainable economic well-being. Prashant is a B.Tech from IIT Kharagpur and a PGDM from IIM Bangalore. Prashant is the president of the Center for Innovation and Governance at Rashtram School of Public Leadership, Rishihood University. I think the most important thing right now, which is what we try to do in our dialogues, is bring together those working in fields of economy and technology, and those who can bring spiritual principles to these fields. The integration of the spiritual into all aspects of our life today is essential for the survival of the human community and the earth. So Prashant, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you very much, Dina, for this introduction. And I would like to thank Indica Yoga and GPIW for hosting this event and organizing a wonderful theme and a very timely theme for our discussions today. I would also like to thank Swami Atmarupananda for a very, very insightful summary of not just the problems that exist globally, but also looking at the Dharma perspectives to look at potential solutions that I think the world needs to look at more deeply and embrace more holistically. I think these are some of the opening comments. And what I would like to do is, because sometimes in the time that's given, words are inadequate, but sometimes a few pictures illustrate ideas and concepts more effectively. So what I would like to do is, I would like to share my screen and be able to just show you some information and some slides in terms of what's happening in the present context. Just give me a moment while I set up. Yeah. So, and that's the topic. The first thing is that I absolutely agree with what has just been said, that modern economic models, they've focused on consumption and continuous growth, and that's owing to the nature of money. The second thing that's happened is that policies have been based on modern economic models that have caused significant damage to the commons, which was just mentioned right now. And I think that needs no further elaboration. And this has been advocated in every one of the major schools of economic thought, from Adam Smith to the more current behavioral economics, which is focusing on looking at the mind and how to incentivize the human being to consume more. So in many ways, it's like everyone's kind of running on a treadmill, which is and they can't cope up anymore. So that's what it is in many ways. The last thing that we want to really do is we also need to examine the myths regarding the progress made by modern economics, because there is the whole cost on the environment, on human health, physical, mental, and spiritual health. I think the planet needs healing, and issues like GDP growth and a lot of these sectors need to be reworked more cohesively, and we need to kind of look at that. So what we're seeing right now is the transition, and the whole nature is of the industrial consumer system of Homo economicus, and looking at man as an economic tool and as an economic being versus the real nature of man. That is the So I'm sorry, there was a bit thing. So when we look at the consumption economy, and when we look at what is taught in our education system currently, we have the consumption economy, we have marketing, we have consumer behavior, we have shopping therapy being promoted as a way of relieving stress. And when we map it into essentially what is a 5-layer model of the human being from the Vedic perspective, these are aimed at 2 distinct layers. Most MBA business schools, most psychology, industrial marketing psychology is aimed at these 2 specific layers, which is the orange layer, which is our physical body and our physical needs. And the second part of it is a green layer, which is the manomaya, or the mental layer, where we are incentivized through a variety of patterns which have been very popularly modeled around what is known as the Pavlovian response and its subsequent derivatives to look at how we kind of respond autonomously without thinking. And if we look at this model, we also are looking at essentially the yoga model and seeing how do we as consumers look at changing our behavior and our approach to what is being imposed upon us. Because at one level, we have the whole system and institutionalization of the Homo economicus model upon us. But as consumers and as people who get more and more sensitive about and aware of what is happening, I think we also need to have the tool sets to teach ourselves, our children, and we need to look at formalizing some of these tool sets into the education system so that the human beings kind of transform back to becoming human beings rather than just becoming, articles of Homo economicus theories that abound. So what is the nature of man? And I think that is, a Vedic view that we kind of look at. For the international audience, I have put the Sanskrit words in italics, and their translation in English is provided as far as possible. A few typos where I still have typos I can see, but forgive me for that. So the first thing is that the nature of man and the objective of human existence is described by one word, which is called Purusharth, and in Sanskrit it means the meaning of man. What is the purpose of his existence? And the whole purpose of the meaning of man is that man pursues a simultaneous objective of greater sovereignty and greater unification with his true nature. And there are essentially four buckets to the meaning of man. The first is that he has to understand the nature, his nature, what is his being, and what are the faculties that he has been actually gifted with. And that is something that our education system is currently, making us, more and more distanced from our real being. So we have to kind of return back to doing that. And that is going to be a long process of restoration. And we have to work in partnership all over the world to make it happen. The second part, and this was also mentioned in the introductory notes, is the acquisition of prosperity and wealth, which is artha. And artha in Sanskrit really means meaning. And it also means relationship. And it means that if you have meaning and if you have wealth and relationships, you are in position of wealth. The third point of it is of the meaning of the human existence is calm. And calm is basically the pursuit of legitimate desires. The Vedanta philosophy believes that we are divine beings who come into physical shapes and forms, and it's also in pursuit of various desires and objectives and various experiences that we must kind of gather as we kind of evolve into more conscious and more evolved creatures in our journey. And finally, the journey ends with a state of being liberated from the lower nature of wants and desires and a transcendence into many higher domains and a greater unification. I will end my introductory talk by giving one example, which has happened in the not so distant society, time in modern principles. Swami Atmarupananda mentioned the nature of money and the fact that it was born out of debt. And it's a very profound and a very deep view, and there are multiple aspects on the nature of money that have been actually written. But in about not so distant past, there were two countries, India and Venezuela, which had at the same time an experiment which happened where they actually just demonetized overnight all their currencies. And if you really look at what happened is that, I'm sorry, I have given these numbers in crores for my international audience. I would like to translate these numbers. The population of India is roughly 1.3 billion people, and the population of Venezuela is 30 million people. And the per capita income in India is roughly 1/8 of Venezuela's per capita income. It has a slightly lower literacy rate, and the size of the Indian economy overall was very large. But and the amount of currency as a percentage of the total currency, in fact, was also very large. 88%, pardon, 86%, pardon, and 77% in the case of Venezuela. But the result of this was that the broader population of 1.3 billion people in India were able to survive and exist and maintain their schedules and commitments within that 50-day period it was enforced. Whereas in Venezuela, the structures broke down within 7 days. So what it illustrates is that social capital, relationships, can transcend for a period of time the artificial creation of money as a means to transact value. For sure, money cannot go out. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that the transition of a society as it goes into newer forms of economy will actually get supported if we start building also a philosophy of progressive development of social capital into our broader population. And it will help some of the transition challenges that we will have as we move from the model of Homo economicus to the model of Artha and well-being. So thank you very much. And I would like to conclude this part over here.
Thank you, Prashant. You know, I think part of our problem is that, at least in the West, is that we have a false understanding of freedom and a false understanding of wealth. And that's, you know, in America, we're considered to be the wealthiest country in the world, and yet 1/3 of our country doesn't have enough to eat. And so when people describe America as being wealthy, I kind of say to myself, what does that mean? Are we back on? Okay. So I think redefining wealth is very important, and redefining freedom is very important. I'm going to now turn to Manish, who we have worked with numerous times. Manish came with us when we went to Bhutan to speak about the Gross National Happiness Index. And again, that was also about re-envisioning the economy. Manish Jain is deeply committed to regenerating our diverse knowledge systems and cultural imaginations. He has served for the past 17 years as coordinator and co-founder of Shikshantar, the People's Institute for Rethinking Education and Development, which is based in Udaipur, India, and he's the co-founder of the University Creative Ada Learning Society's Unconference, Walkouts Walk On Network, and Udaipur as a learning city in India. And I have to say, Udaipur is one of my beloved cities of India. I've been there a few times and I love it. He's a featured speaker, advisory member of the Economics of Happiness Network for Localization. I could say much more. He's recently helped launch the Ecoversities Network. And of course, this all begins with education. We can't shift our economy unless we address education. Everything is linked, as that's one of the principles of Dharma, everything is linked. So Manish, I turn it to you now.
Great, thank you, Dina. It's so wonderful to be with such an esteemed group of people and such a beautiful framing of this session. And the two presentations before me really laid a good foundation. When I was reflecting on this, I first started to think about my own journey with the economic system. I've been a big believer in trying to over the years demystify economics, because it was one of the subjects I studied in university, and lots of graphs and lots of formulas, and most people get lost in it. So how can we demystify it? So I thought I'll just start with a little bit of my own journey. So my first real encounter, I would say, with the global economic system was when I was a teenager. I will have to admit here that I'm a survivor. Spent years and years of my youth in shopping malls in the suburbs of America. And there, the first encounter was really with an idea of economics and in the global economy, and how it manufactures an unhealthy sense of emptiness, and we are always looking for that happiness by consuming stuff, and so and a lot of strong sense of, one of the real things that it focuses on is peer pressure. So I had that, and was as a youth very much influenced by that, and somehow found it. Luckily found my way out of that. But as a university student, I started studying economics, and one of the things that really I remember from that time is one of my professors, they said, if you're ever having the best thing to do when you have an economic downturn is to start a war. And he systematically showed how the U.S. and other economies, when they were having downturns, that they had started wars, and kind of a lot of economic growth started happening. So even this indicator of GDP, I started questioning, GDP is a measure of what actually? If you're having a war and fighting and killing people and bombing them, then the GDP goes up, for example. So that question started coming to me. Then I was in my career, I started my first job was as an investment banker on Wall Street. And that's when I really got a taste of what I would say that how rigged the system is. The system is rigged to steal wealth from communities and from the commons. And there is a moral principle that is, when I was a banker, lots of people started to having moral dilemmas, inner crises about what exactly are we doing. And so they would always remind us of this economic principle of trickle-down theory, and that the wealth, that supposedly let the rich make the rich people richer, and so slowly that wealth will trickle down to communities and to people. And somehow when I was there, I realized that the wealth actually was not trickling down, but it was designed to gush up from nature and communities into the hands of a few. So this was not by accident, it was by design, and that's how the global economy works. And then I had once I was quite disillusioned by this whole model, and I kind of also at that time was really, I was 23 years old and experiencing the glamour of the life of an investment banker. So 5-star hotels, Armani suits, supermodels, crazy parties. And one day I woke up and I kind of all disappeared. It all kind of dissolved for me. And I was left with the question, is this it? Is there something more to life? And that started off another journey for me of what's beyond this current economy and what it promises in terms of happiness and security. And for the last 20 years, I've been experimenting how do I move from Homo economicus, which is what all of us were trained and conditioned in, to what I call Homo giftus. That what does it mean? We are all, our life is a gift, our purpose is a gift, and how do we start to live that fully? And that's the only way that I feel that we can live a life of Dharma. So I've been experimenting of doing many experiments of life outside of the global economy, the money system. And in Swaraj University, we've been doing many experiments to understand the commons, the other kinds of wealth that exists in the real wealth, I would say, that exists in our communities. You had mentioned, Dina, about America, and I think that we are and is considered one of the wealthiest countries. But actually, if we think about it, whether it's America or the big corporations or the billionaires, they all measure themselves in terms of the money system. And if we actually think about it, the money system has nothing backing it up. So they have a lot of digital zeros to their names, but there's nothing really backing a lot of that up. And actually, I've met many wealthy people in the economic system, and actually, even more than that is the kind of scarcity that drives or holds them hostage. So there's a lot of questions which I think we can raise about that. When I think about life of and the relationship of Dharma, the 2 or 3 words come up to me. One is alignment. What is a life of inner alignment, inner and outer alignment? And second word is harmony. And in Hindi, we talk about the word Swaraj, which literally means self-rule, but also I think autonomy, sovereignty, self-mastery, self-awareness are all associated. And I think that in terms of a principles level for Dharma, there's 2 or 3 things I would like to highlight. So one is, I think the idea of Dharma is built on a profound understanding of the connection between the sacred and the material. And so one of the traps that we've fallen into, modernity, modern science, is to think that the material world is separate and the sacred or spiritual world is separate. And as we know from most indigenous cultures, my closest experience of that, I've lived with a lot of indigenous communities in India, but living with my grandmother, village grandmother for 10 years, I really understood what that meant much more deeply. But so this worldview of understanding that there is a sacredness in everything material is something that I think we have to recover if we want to bring a connection between Dharma and economics. The second thing is this idea of the word transaction was used. So I don't see life as a transaction. I see transaction is based on a view of separation, that you and I are separate, that's why we have to transact. I would prefer the word sharing, or one of my friends uses the word mothering as different metaphors for how we do things. And the idea of transaction is somehow grounded in a philosophy that more for you means less for me. And so we're always trying to maximize what we get out of it. But I think a life of Dharma, or a vision of Dharma, would actually say, let us build an economic system where more for you is also more for me. So that's the second thing I would offer. And the third in this I would offer is that the conversation about flow, that our gifts of life that we receive have to flow in order to grow. So we talk about that in many ways, that, you know, if you hold on to things too tightly, things start to stagnate, and you start to stagnate. And, you know, in all things of nature, the idea that everything has a natural life, you know, that if you had grains, people used to share grains before. So if you held on it too long, it would start to, you know, rot and stagnate. And so there was always an interest to share, and build relationship with that sharing. But I think the money system encourages is actually the opposite, a system of hoarding. So I think one of the third principles of Dharma in economics I would offer is that the gifts have to flow in order to grow. And so for example, we have built our entire work on the idea of copy left rather than copy right. So that the idea that knowledge, the more we share with each other, the more it grows, for example. I'm just wondering, so I think, just to wrap up here, is to think that, you know, and some people have brought in this framework of the 3 Ps, people, planet, and profit, as a way of you know, exploring alignment. There's another framework that Gandhiji offered, the 4 H's, head, heart, hands, and home. So is our economy actually connected to these 4? When we make economic decisions, are we connecting to these 4 parameters? And I think that one other frame I would offer is that, you know, some questions that we can ask ourselves, you know, does the work I do personally, does that inspire me? Do I feel like the work I'm doing is serving life on the planet? And I think that when we think about, you know, a life of Dharma and economics of Dharma based on Dharma, we need to think from 2 angles: what we want, what kind of world do we want? And also today, it's very important to talk about what we don't want. Because there are many things, for example, you know, the kind of you know, unbridled consumerism, or the unbridled control and power that global corporations have today. So there are many things that with the current economic system that we may want to keep, and there are many things we don't want to keep. So I think these are some of the questions I think that might help in the inquiry. I can, I mean, in terms of how much, I think I'll just pause here, because I have many more things around what concretely we can do specifically. So if there's time, I can share that as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manish. I'm glad you brought up, mentioned the illusory nature of the wealth with all those zeros after in your portfolio. It could all disappear overnight. And there's such an insecurity in the system, and that's why there's such fear. It's a fear-based system. And, you know, we've talked a lot about the need to shift. We both worked with international institutions. We've worked as NGOs with the UN system. And I'm always amazed how it's all focused on outer development, not inner development, which is the key. And so I've always viewed my wealth as my spiritual practice. I mean, I know the most important thing that will generate my well-being is my spiritual practice and also relationships. You know, this is the true wealth of an individual, because everything else could disappear overnight. So I want to shift now a little bit. We've done a lot of work in the field of climate change because it's right there. And it's going to shake the global economy. And I've thought that if we don't change willingly, nature herself will help us make this shift. But now we have COVID who's come to force some kind of change. And with, you know, COVID, the whole economy, it's happening in the US, and I'm sure it's happening in India as well, is being shaken because people are now home. They're not shopping. So an economy based on consumption. I remember in 2000, when we had 9/11, the attack in the US, what was our then President Bush's counsel to America? Shop, go shopping. That was his immediate response, go shopping. And at that point, you were still able to go shopping because it's keep the economy going. Now people can't go shopping. And so department stores that have been there for decades are closing. People's habits are changing. Jobs that have gone are not going to come back because the consumer society, people's mindset has changed. People are afraid to go mingle in large crowds. And so here's an opportunity for the beginning of significant change. So I want to go back to Swamiji and see how you envision this pandemic that we're going through, how it can help change our thinking and begin to reshape the economy.
Yes, thank you, Dina. And thank you, Manish Ji and Prashant Ji, for your wonderful words. All of you gave so many stimulating ideas. So, ideas for the future. Of course, we need to go backwards to go forward in our understanding. And so one of the things that was mentioned was by all of you, was the sense of dissatisfaction which is created in the modern economic system. And to understand that, we need to go back to the fact that up until the 19th century, when people had a need, they went out and purchased something to fill the need. And it was a practical need that was felt, and that was filled by purchasing a service or a good. But starting in the late 19th century in America, beginning with America and then spreading around the world, it was discovered by people involved in economic activity that if we created needs in people, we could sell many more goods. So instead of just providing a dress for someone who needed a dress, bring fashion into the picture. Previously, of course, there was fashion all over the world, but that was for the wealthy people who had disposable income. But it was found that if we could create a sense of need in people, then we could greatly expand the economic activity. And that continued in the 20th century in a huge proliferation of the creation of the sense of need. So what was being done was creating a sense of emptiness in the person with the feeling that by purchasing, purchasing something that I didn't know I needed, but people tell me I need, then I can fill that hole that I'm feeling inside of myself. And that was part of the conversion of the citizen into the consumer. So that Dina just referred to this, after the attack on the World Trade Center in September 11th, 2001, then the President of the United States told people, show the terrorists that they are not going to win, go out and shop. Now, a century earlier, even 50 years earlier, the citizenry would have been offended by a statement like that, to think that my value is in shopping. But when he said it in 2001, hardly anybody thought anything, because we had been converted into consumers. So coming back to Dina's question, what can we do? One of the things with the Dharmic economy is to go back to the ending of the seeing the human being as a consumer, and the ending of this creation of false needs among people. Yes, people have things, we all have things that we need in order to live. And there are things that we don't really need, but things that we like, and that is part of natural human life. But the creation, the creation of imaginary needs, that is something that is not sustainable. And so going back to recognizing the unity underlying life, recognizing, as Manish Ji said, that there's not a division between the sacred and the secular, that existence itself is sacred. And as he said also, that was recognized all over the world. In India, but by tribal cultures all over the world, that life itself is sacred. And the activities of life are sacred also. When life is created into just material transaction, then we get all of these associated problems. So recognizing the sacredness of life, recognizing the unity of life, recognizing that the purpose of life is not consumption, the value of life is not consumption, that happiness in life does not come from fulfilling imaginary needs. Another thing that we need to conceive of, and there are many people thinking of these things, and there are wonderful ideas that are coming up around the world, but they haven't become dominant yet. We need to conceive of a new philosophy of work, a new work ethic. The present system is based on the idea that started in the West and spread around the world, that work is for the sake of earning money so that I can go out and do the things I really want to do. Work basically is not what I want to do. It's a way of getting money, and money allows me to do what I want to do. And so for many people, some people love their work and they're very, very fortunate. God bless them. But many people are working in jobs that they don't like, but working because they need to get money in order to do the things that they really want to do. So a new philosophy of work, which sees work as self-actualization, which sees work as yoga. Whether a person is spiritually minded or not, that doesn't matter. Still, it can be seen as yoga in a general sense, a way to self-actualize, a way to discover oneself, to bring out one's potential, etc. Another thing that Manish Jain mentioned, which needs to be brought further into the conversation for a dharmic economy, is the ownership of knowledge. He mentioned copyright and patent law and so forth, and the wonderful idea of copyleft, which means you can use the fruits of my labor as long as you don't use it to enrich just yourself. I give it to you to use, but you have to respect the fact that I have made a gift, and you have to make a gift of what you do with it also. And of course, there are various permutations of the concept of copyleft. The ownership of knowledge has become a major problem, where the discoveries are patented, copyrighted, trademarked, etc., for longer and longer periods of time, so that the original idea of giving a person a chance to make something from their discovery, so that they'll be encouraged to discover, and then give it to the commons. That has been much reduced now by extending the patent and copyright laws. So the ancient idea that knowledge is part of the commons, and that's what science is based on. If I discover a new computer programming routine, and I can patent that routine just because I was the first to use it, then that hurts the development of computer science, because I have discovered a way to program that now I own, and you have to pay me for using that. Whereas if that were part of the commons of knowledge, then everyone could build on that, and the benefit to humanity would be much, much greater. So we need to come to a recognition of the ownership of knowledge is humanity at large. That yes, there may be a period where a person can profit from a discovery, but that has to be more limited than at present. The idea of the sacredness of life, the idea of the foundation of the monetary system, where it's not based on lack and need and the insecurities which Adina was speaking about. So let me end by saying that there are a number of experiments which are going on. There are experiments with local currencies to keep money circulating within a community. There are experiments with worker cooperatives and worker-owned businesses, so that the people who are doing the work share in the benefits of the work equitably. They're the experiments with sustainable communities, they're experiments with the local grown food movement, solidarity economies, they're Buddhist economies, Gandhian economies, gift economies, as Manish Ji mentioned. The experiment in Bhutan with defining happiness not based on GDP, gross domestic product, but G&H, gross national happiness. And so there are a number of other experiments which are going on. And so in some way we need to well, not in some way, let me say it more specifically. We need to reconceive of the economic system in dharmic terms, recognizing the unity of life, the shared responsibility, the structurally formed so that sharing itself is recognized as a benefit. As Manish Ji said also, that whenever we collect something and then keep it stored too long, then it begins to degenerate, whether that's water, whether it's grain or whatever. The same with wealth, that if there needs to be the flow of wealth within society. As Swami Vivekananda said, power and resources are collected for distribution, not collected in order to hold them as a power over other people, but collected for distribution to the greater good. So anyway, all of these ideas I see as part of the necessity for a future dharmic economy based on the recognition of the unity of life and the sacredness of all life.
Thank you, Swamiji. You know, the system that we have, the system, the global economic system, took decades, really centuries to evolve. And so all these experiments now will take time to really manifest on a larger scale. But because of the limits to the earth and the ecological system and climate change and nature responding to us, I don't think we have decades. So I think that there is an acceleration going on with many experiments, as you said, many experiments taking place in different parts of the world, which will facilitate a quicker shift. That's our hope. Prashant, do you want to add anything to this? And then I'll turn to Manish.
No, I think there have been some very, very deep thoughts, and I think there are a couple of areas, and the first thing is that there is a necessity to change, but the key questions are in terms of from here, where do we go and how do we go there? That is, these are the two very fundamental questions. And I think if we have, we work on guesswork or on, frameworks that are not very stable, we could kind of land up deepening the problems that we are in. So it's very essential for planners and governments and even citizens, because this is going to be a 360-degree change that needs to be effected. And as you mentioned, the climate change, imperatives and the environmental damage is creating the necessity to change very quickly. So the first thing I think that needs to be done is using the media or social media and education is a very broad consumer awareness about, simple things like what is the net primary productivity in terms of air, water, capacity for the natural system to even generate oxygen, fresh water or food in the ecosystem. And these things can be measured. And second part of it is what percentage of what we produce is actually appropriated by human beings. And as that, as we start consuming higher percentages of what our ecologies can give us, we start moving closer to the edge. I actually see, a complete lack on illiteracy, and probably a deliberate attempt by many governments to keep these statistics private and not publish them. And I think it is the role of every citizen to kind of look at saying, what is our net primary productivity in our locality, in our state, in our country, in our continent, on this planet. And in my town, in my community, in my state, in my country, how much are we consuming and what are we appropriating? And are we appropriating so much that we endanger other life forms? And these are very simple metrics, and these are measurable, and they give populations immediate feedback. The second thing that I want to talk is the fact that democratic governments, and we would like to really emphasize this, the democratic governments get elected because of the the distribution of a normal curve, and there is a mean voter, and plus minus that mean there is a standard norm, and most politicians always aim for that mean and shape public policies. So it's imperative that populations re-educate themselves, that they are no longer tools of the Homo economicus regime, but they are sovereign beings. And the way to do that is through the tools of yoga. Yoga has some excellent tools in the yam practices, and the first practice of asteya in the yam practice of the aparigraha. Let me just translate it for everyone. Asteya is the whole principle of non-stealing, non-taking, and aparigraha is non-possessiveness, not taking ownership of something that doesn't belong to you. So these principles have to be going in. I think the yoga studios have to go beyond the asana and move into a more broader appreciation of the principles of yam and niyam, and these have to go on and get more broad-based everywhere. And that's one of the first basis of the Eightfold Path of Yoga. I think and these are very simple, intuitive tools to teach. They don't take a very long time to understand. Everyone is equipped with the faculties to understand them very quickly. So the essence is to reflect on the key tools of yam and niyam and integrate them into virtually every conversation as soon as possible, and look at the appropriation of the factors of net primary productivity in terms of air, water, oxygen, and how much do we share with other life forms on this planet. I think these are going to be metrics which will start giving feedback to everybody in terms of where they stand on the evolutionary and the sustainability debates.
Thank you, Prashant. There are so many yoga studios around the world. If they would go beyond the asanas, it would have a great impact. So that's an important recommendation. Manish, we'll turn to you, and then we'll open to questions.
Great. Hi, Dina. Again, I'm back. So I would like to maybe name a few specific things that I'm involved in terms of how we're trying to shift from I would say economy based on rakshas, or destruction, to one that's based on Dharma and regeneration and harmony. So one thing that we've been doing a lot of work on is this idea of localization. So shifting from a global economy to an idea of localization. It's very interesting that Prime Minister Modi has also raised the term local recently, but maybe I'll highlight a few dimensions of what I mean about it. So the first thing is that can we try to shift back to a model where the majority of our production and our consumption is happening locally. Right now, for example, and as I was reading something, the US, for example, they talk about food miles. So the average that something travels, some food travels from the farm to your plate is on average 1,500 miles, which is crazy for things like food. So much of can we start to think about maximizing the local production and consumption capacities again, much of which we've outsourced to other parts of the world. In that also the idea of can we re-emphasize and revalue the use of the hands. In India, for example, the hands, people who use the hands are seen as of lower value, but actually if you see from other knowledge traditions, actually the hands and creating things with the hands are actually, I would say, lead to the highest forms of consciousness. Otherwise, you usually have a very fragmented consciousness. So how do we bring creation, do-it-yourself culture again, a use of the hands back into our economic models? And in places like India, where we have population, bringing a kind of philosophy of economics, which is around reducing the idea of labor and making things more dependent on technologies and fossil fuels seems almost ludicrous. Also, a lot of the production and consumption, the most concrete way I see it happening around the world and most powerful right now is around our food systems. So really, how can we, and I think in the times of COVID, this has really been something that is a lot of people have started talking about and thinking about is really, can we localize our food systems as a starting point? A second thing I would bring into localization is this idea of voluntary simplicity and decluttering. In many parts of the world, people are waking up to this idea that less is more. This is actually in the Jain tradition, something we've been talking about for more than 2,500 years, is that actually less is much can bring you much more inner satisfaction, happiness, respect, and intimacy than maybe having more and more stuff. So this idea that we can declutter, in Europe, they're talking a lot about this idea of degrowth. So can we reduce this dependency on growth of only material growth? I think that's a second dimension. The third of localization I would bring is really a focus to build more spaces for kindness and trust. How do we rebuild the field of trust? When I was growing up in the US, I remember, and now that this disease has come into India as well, it's like your parents telling you, don't talk to your strangers, don't trust your neighbors. All of this kind of thing, I think, we can come out and start to rebuild a field of trust as part of our localization. That will open up. I call it actually there's an exponential possibilities that get created when you get fields of trust in place again. The fourth dimension of that I would like to talk about is our idea of investment. Like when we are putting in our money in the bank, every few weeks, a bank salesperson comes and says, would you like to invest in this mutual fund or that mutual fund? And I said, I would like to invest in a fund which is regenerating life on the planet, which is regenerating my local community, which is supporting local farmers, small farmers. Do you have any fund like that? And they all look at me in disbelief and run away. But I think we can think about how to invest. How do we, one of my friends talks about shifting our wealth from Wall Street to Main Street. So how can we take our money out of banks? And there's another movement that's called slow money, investing it locally into the things we care about. And I think also, as Swamiji was mentioning, this idea of ownership. So I think as we think of localization, we move from an idea of ownership that actually, from a spiritual tradition, we know that we are not owners of anything. This is one of the biggest lies we've been fed. And actually, how do we move into what Gandhiji also talked about was collective trusteeship, that we are trustees and our job is to actually help the flourishing of life, helping move life to the next and possibilities to the next generations. So I think these are 4 dimensions of localization I would like to add. At the same time, I think we need to involve ourselves in asking some big picture questions also. So one of the problems with the global economy is that we are ourselves subsidizing our own destruction. That our tax money, the government subsidies are actually, if you think about, for example, one of the things I ask young people, for example, is what is the entire life cycle of producing a plastic bag which you get for free in the vegetable market? And they start talking about all the petrol that has to be extracted and the ecological damage and then the transport and the processing and all of these things. And I said, how can it become given to us for free? And so if you study into it more deeply, you'll understand that the entire, whether it's the extraction industry, whether it's the waste industry, whether it's the military industry, these are all being subsidized by our taxes and supported. So I think some of these big picture questions we need to get ourselves more in, understand. There's a whole bunch of trade agreements which are being signed by our governments, which are giving, disgusting level of power to global corporations. So much that if, the corporations can sue governments if they don't support them in destroying our local ecosystems and exploiting our workers. So I think some of these big picture things we need to look into very seriously. And the last thing I want to say is that the education system. So the education system, again, by its design, is been designed to produce economic slaves and in economic consumers. So there are some fundamental shifts that we need to bring into the education system. We talk about, one of the things right now is that the universities are training us for what we call deadlihoods, whether it's extracting from nature, whether it's fields which are financing the extraction, or whether it's fields which are legally protecting all of the theft and extraction. This is what the mainstream university is training us for. And what we're talking about is a need to shift to what we call a livelihoods. What are the regenerative work, the careers that are going to help us make our spirits internally come alive again? What's the work that is going to help us rebuild a sense of community and trust? And what is the work in the world that we can do to regenerate our, massively depleted ecosystems and the biosphere? So I think the education model, I used to think when I worked for UNESCO that education was the solution, but now I feel that it is one of the primary problems and reasons for the crisis, because the education system and the global economy go hand in hand with each other, and one is feeding into the other. So these are a few areas where I think that we can link to and start working on more actively. Many people are doing this around the world. I just want to say one last thing is that, one of the other things which I've been very in the localization work been very inspired by is the idea of joint family. And this goes to what I was talking about, field of trust, joint family and intentional communities. So one of the most, I think, I would say most stupid things that we have done is we have opted for this nuclear family model. I think that I've been in many places now in India and other countries where people are realizing that this was a wrong decision on many levels. and that there's a way to rebuild a new economy that starts from the way we conceive of family. And I think that there are many things. It doesn't have to be your biological family. People are building their families of choice. I met some friends recently in Australia. There's 18 families living together, choosing to live together, and they are rebuilding a sense of commons. They're sharing, they have shared vehicles. They have a kitchen garden that they're growing food together. They're shared caretaking for their children. They have models of, sharing food together to build, cooking food together every day. So I think that we can, it's, some of these things we need to start to reconnect to if we want to move to a model of Dharma and economy, Dharmic-based economy. And the last thing I just say is, I would really invite, when I used to hear about Dharma, I used to think, oh, this is, you have to be very serious, and it's about duty, and it's about loyalty, and it's about upholding something. But I think, I would like to bring this spirit of like playfulness and humor and love and shape-shifting and healing and connecting and hugging into our ideas of Dharma and our conversations. So thank you so much, Dina. Hello, are you? Anuradha, Dina?
Okay, there it is.
Great.
You brought up so many important issues, and this deserves a lot more attention. But the whole localization movement.
I think we have to have a conference on this, Dina.
Yes, we will. And the localization movement has to sweep the world as the globalization movement did, and we have to put that into the past now. We will continue this. I'm going to turn it over. I mean, all these contributions have really just started a conversation, and it's so important that spiritual communities engage in this issue. So important that spiritual communities engage in this. When I was younger, the spiritual communities, they were just involved in their own development and just their own practices. And I see a shift now, but it's so critical that the yoga studios and that everybody begin thinking about this, because this has to do with the collective well-being, and individual and collective well-being. It's one. So
I would just say one thing, Dina, that I think that the localization movement, we need the spiritual communities. I was giving a talk at the degrowth movement, and I said we cannot build a real movement for shifting the economy based on Excel spreadsheets. We need to have a spiritual grounding, and this is the way. It has to come from the spiritual communities and a conversation and a co-creation process.
And that will be our conference, the Spiritual Foundation for a New Economy. I'm going to write that down. I remember that. Okay, I'm going to have to sign off and pass this on to Anuradha. Thank you all. Thank you for opening up this discussion, which will be continued. Anuradha.
Thank you very much, Dina, for moderating a very stimulating discussion between people who have had such vast experience in the field. So may I request all the panelists to come on screen, and we'll try and have a conversation. I was also wondering if Marianne had anything to say before she left the meeting now. Marianne, do you want to say anything? Any thoughts that came to your mind when you heard these experts?
I think the panelists said it so beautifully. I agree that the foundation for any kind of new economy has to really be fundamental, and has to start with our really getting in touch with our deeper values of love for humanity, love for each other. There are so many on earth who have nothing. We cannot continue like this. We have to awaken this feeling in our heart that the way things are right now, it is not right. And so we work on our values of being less selfish, being more loving, looking at things that heal the earth. We cannot continue treating the earth as we have done for so long. It is insanity. So yeah, the shifts must happen in our hearts, in our way of thinking, and this can come from spiritual communities, it can come from local community leaders, it can come from thought leaders that have spoken here. We need to find these people, identify them, highlight their work, quote them, write about them, talk about them, because so many young people are not hearing their voices enough. They're just hearing these, you know, very fear-mongering, you know, just fear-mongering voices that just have not a beautiful vision of what is really possible on Earth. So we need to find those voices that can really show that there is possible to have economies where we don't have to work, you know, 10 hours a day to buy our basic needs. There's a beautiful concept of this writer who lived 100 years ago, or he passed away maybe 50 years ago, Edmondo Bordeaux-Zaquet. And he talked about the cottage economy. And these were small communities where you lived and you had your gardens and you had your friends and you had handicrafts you did with your hands and you produced your medicine. You didn't get sick because you weren't stressed out all the time. And he was saying in these little communities, and he based a lot of his writings on the work of the Essenes, he said people worked 2 hours a day and the rest of the time they had for leisure, for prayer, for study. So how do we get back to these kinds of visions? You know, it is possible. So I'm very encouraged by the many different things happening now in the new economy and all these new concepts and ideas that are coming out. But yeah, they must come from the heart and based on this view of unselfishness, of love. And I think then they will have a fundamental root that will allow them to take off. And maybe it will take some time, but I think we have a good start already. So thank you, all of you. It was a great, great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marion, for sharing that note of hope with not just the panelists, but also with all the participants. Thank you very much. And also for dedicating your life to promoting these ideas in different spheres across the world. Thank you.
Thank you all. Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye. I would just like to ask Hannah if very briefly she would like to just say something as someone from the from a younger generation. How do you see this when you hear all these experts talking of it? Would you like to just share 2 thoughts before you also move on? Hannah? All right. I'm afraid we don't have Hannah here with us, but I'd like to request Swami Atmarupananda, whom we fondly refer to Swami A, to share his thoughts because he'll also have to leave us shortly. So Swamiji, you'd like to just maybe say a few words?
Yes, thank you, Anuradha. First of all, it's been a great pleasure to be with all of you. And so my final thought for today, there are many thoughts that could be shared, but my final thought for today is that when we face the size of the problem, the economy is not a small thing. It's a huge force in life, supported by huge institutions, supported by great powers. So when we're facing the economic situation, we're also facing governmental situations, international agreements, international bodies, corporations. It's a huge system with great power. And so it can seem that it's something that we can do nothing about. We feel disempowered in the face of the size of the problem. But that's not true. There are 2 things to keep in mind. One is that the present system is based on inner contradictions. And as it gets bigger and bigger, more and more powerful, those inner contradictions are growing as well. And those inner contradictions are going to bring its downfall. And so the system itself is unsustainable, which means it's not going to last. And so however big and powerful it looks now, that's not the actual situation. It is crumbling already. The present economic crisis in the world because of COVID-19 is one of the signs of the inner contradictions, the signs that the thing is ready to crumble with something as small as a virus. The other thing to remember is that we in our individual lives, when we are in the face of a huge worldwide system that looks indomitable, that we're not powerless, that we may not be able to give a direct frontal attack on the system, but we can in our own lives begin to do the things that we want to see at the larger scale. And in time, that is what's going to work. I mentioned all of these experiments going on around the world with localization, which Manish Jain also talked about, and other experiments going on. As the bigger system begins to crash, these are going to be like sprouts that are coming up from the ground. Some will work, some won't work. That's the nature of life. But it's these signs of hope that are coming up now. So let us participate with those. Let us, as Gandhiji didn't actually say it, but he's often paraphrased as saying, and misquoted as saying, be the change that you want to see in the world. So let us do that. The system is not as strong as it looks, and we are not as powerless as we look. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Swamiji, for those empowering final words for this particular session. I think this session has, people were wondering what economics is doing in the middle of a yoga festival. But I think the comment of some participants has proven that this has been an eye-opener indeed. Raksha Lohia ji saying, thank you all the panelists. It was an eye-opener making economy spiritual based. So I think you've sown a few important seeds in the atmosphere, and people are already gearing up for the conference that is going to be organized. Manish ji, people are taking it up very seriously. So, so this was just a trailer for what we hope will be a much elaborate discussion. And like I said, with this COVID situation, we really have the opportunity of a reset button. It's something that we could have never imagined before, but just the way in which all the conventional systems are breaking down due to the unprecedented problem of the COVID pandemic, we are forced, we're being, the nature is thrusting upon us the need to rethink ourselves, to reimagine our societies in significant ways. So thank you very much, Swamiji. And if you can stay with us, do stay with us as long as you can. There are many, do stay with us as long as you can, and when you need to leave, yes, thank you. So there are many questions that have come up. There are many thoughts that have been shared, and there are many questions also that have emerged. It's going to be difficult to pick any one of them, but what I will just do is that I'll just take maybe a question here. Ramakrishna ji is saying that actually, don't you think the modern industrial society has actually kept large numbers of humans much safer during the COVID-19 pandemic when compared to the outcomes of the plagues of Athens or Rome, or even the 1918 flu pandemic? So it's interesting because you're also looking at this, the industrial society as a positive outcome of keeping us protected. So how would you respond to that? Because we're looking at COVID as a hope for a new thing to emerge, and there is also a possibility of continuing that way of looking at things. So what would you say? Any of you, if you can unmute, I guess all of us can unmute and become like a panel, a visible panel on the screen.
I would sometimes I share the metaphor, Anuradha, of steroids, bodybuilders on steroids. And so if you think about as a kind of way to think about industrial society or industrial civilization, if you want to call it that. So what I mean by that is that, if you think about a bodybuilder on steroid, they take a lot of these steroids and they look like really big, gigantic, powerful, muscular. But if you actually look at what's happening inside their bodies, all their organs, all the things you need for life are rotting. And I think so the same thing is, many of the the ways that we have framed industrial civilization, the last 100 years, we're starting to see the rot now. It was hidden from us for the last 100 years. People like Gandhiji and Sri Aurobindo and Tagore could see it coming, but a lot of people had much more faith in that we could avoid the rot. But it's actually all around us, both in terms of our inner well-being, our relationships, our ecosystems. It's all coming out now at once. And so even things like COVID, I think there are a lot of thinkers who will say, or even let's say environmentalists who will say that the COVID and even the other viruses that we're facing around the planet are coming out of because of the destruction of nature. Our ecosystems are being destroyed, the forests are being destroyed, and so animals and all kinds of beings that were safe in the forest have to flee and now are coming into human life with us. And so I think I'm not sure if it's protecting us, but I think again how interconnected and interwoven things are is becoming and how fragile. What's coming out to me most over the last 3-4 months is more clearly is how fragile and dysfunctional the global system is, the industrial system is. It's not able to, this thing of people are wishful thinking that there's going to be some magic vaccine created that's going to solve it. This system is this virus is showing that most of the promises of modernity and modern industrial civilization are fake, that we don't have solutions for dealing with this.
Thank you very much, yes, for making that point so strongly to remind us of our own fragility. Prashantji, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, please.
I think the points made earlier, that the fundamental contradictions and the fundamental untruths do not stand the test of time. So the inherent weaknesses of the economic models tend to collapse. There have been, since the time modern economics got defined in the 1770s with Adam Smith's seminal book, The Wealth of Nations, to the current day, there have been roughly about 9 economic models. And the reason each model has come up is because the previous model collapsed. It's time for us to look fundamentally at economics as a discipline and tie it up with the life forces and understanding of the internal unmanifest subtle domains inside human beings and inside all living beings, and that intelligence and that life principle that exists has to come forth in manners which we have suppressed and we have manipulated and we have distorted. So understanding those internal subtle domains becomes essentially the nature of work everyone will have to engage in. It's a thing, I think we are on this forum with the Global Peace Initiative for Women, and they have very big role in understanding the subtle domains. Women are by nature more intuitive, and it is a great opportunity for the women attending this thing to understand and educate themselves and start passing on this knowledge and whatever they can gather from a variety of sources onto their children. I think that was going to be a first step in terms of leading a more kinder, compassionate, and a complete society. And that is the meaning of artha and true wealth. And the mechanics to measure it and how we grow, all of those things will come from spreadsheets that are derived from spirituality and not spreadsheets which suppress spirituality.
Thank you very much for those thought-provoking words, and also for putting so much of hope in the woman community, because what we see in the yoga world, especially in the Western yoga world, there are many women who are engaging in the yogic discourses. So I think with the change of with the woman becoming empowered in that way, I think that will help the families become more empowered, and consequently communities, and then nations, and we'll all subsequently move towards a better world. Thank you for that note of hope. Swamiji, are you there for sharing your thoughts on this? All right. So what I'd like to do is take up just one more question, and then I'll come back to you, requesting you to share a little bit of the work that you're doing in your respective organizations. So Indica Yoga is also a platform to let the world community know of authentic, immersive, and transformative practices that are happening in different domains of life that are connected to the spiritual ontology. So we'll come back to you with that. But what I'd like first, what I'll do is to just take another question, which I thought was very important. This question is about making the connection between dharma and karma. So it's a participant who's saying that, is India following the same steps that America did 50 to 100 years ago? And how do we balance dharma and karma? So this balancing of dharma and karma, how would you shed some more light on that for us, please? So Prashantji, could I request you to start answering that one?
Yes, the relationship of dharma and karma is integral. The philosophy is that our actions shape our outcomes, and the responsibility of what state we land up is very much dependent upon our actions. And injecting in an element of consciousness, an element of compassion, an element of integrality of whatever we do and how it impacts things around us is very, very necessary. I think the education system has basically been celebrating the the focus of individuality. But I think what we really need to look at is the focus on integrality of everything, and the need for people to be more responsible and conscious of the impact of their actions.
Thank you. Thank you for those reminders. Manish Ji? Manish Ji? We balance dharma and karma.
I think balance is not the word. Integrate is probably a better word. So, for example, I talk about some of these fragmentations that have been created. We need to look at, so we think our work and our private spiritual practice are separate, and I think that we would have to, at least for me, I've made a very conscious effort to try to really integrate these things, my actions, and also to maybe think about how, like I can give you a very, let me just share maybe a story in this. It was very inspiring. So one of my local heroes, gurus, was a Gandhian person, and he shared a story about his father. His name was Dayal Chand Soni, and his father was Hira Chand. So he was a silversmith, and so the local king here had asked him to saw a beautiful necklace and asked him to make this necklace for him. And I think, and so he made this necklace, and the king was really happy about it and thrilled. And every time he saw Hira Chandji, he would praise him in front of everyone. Look at what a master craftsman I have. And he's so great. He's produced such a great, beautiful necklace for me. And one day then when he was praising Hira Chand asked him, do you have that necklace? Can I see it? So he told one of his guards to go and fetch it and bring that necklace to him. And all of a sudden, Hira Chand took out a hammer and he started smashing that necklace to pieces. And he said, and everyone was like freaking out. What is this guy doing? You know, he's gone mad. And the local king, the Raja, was saying, you know, like, what's going on? What are you doing? And he said, look, ever since I produced this necklace, I knew I could have created something more beautiful. And every time you praise me, it pinches me. And so I want to destroy this necklace, and I want to actually remake it, because I think that it, you know, for me, this is a spiritual act. Creating something, doing something. It's my connection with the divine. And I know that internally that I could make something more beautiful and more profound in service of the divine. And so I'm going to remake this necklace for you. So I think that this built-in, you know, this idea of, you know, the Dharma is built into our karma, is what I would say through the story, you know, like our sense of Dharma and where we see ourselves in relation, and every single little action, whether it's the food we eat or you know, the things we make, how do we bring those into everyday life, I think is something I'm very, that excites me a lot. And I try to bring into our education models have to bring this integration into them.
Thank you very much, Manishi. I'll just read out a comment from a participant, Isabel Maria Lopez Aguayo. And she's saying, thanks, I never thought about the relationship between spirituality and economy, but you have exposed it in a very logical and understanding way. Now I have much more to think about, but living your spirituality in a consequent way leads you to non-attachment principles, not greedy, etc. So very informative and very useful lecture, and thank you to all of you. May I now request you to just share a little bit of the work that you're doing in very practical ways to bring light. So like we were saying with yoga, you help bring light in yourself, but also spread it in different contexts. So you've been doing some amazing work called at the Jain University. Could you kindly share some of that with us? And then we can move on to Prashant Ji and request him to talk about the Rashtram and the work that he's doing there. And then we'll do the announcements, followed by 3 actionable plans that you would suggest for our participants.
Yeah. Do you want to show that video, Anuradha? Or should we show it first or no?
Yes. Kotiji, could you kindly show that video, please?
क्यों प्यार तू करता एक तरफ कर यारा एक तरफ कर यारा एक तरफ कर यारा फिर मांग कर देख तू मुझसे दे दूं तुझको सारा दे दूं तुझको सारा दे दूं तुझको सारा हट कर कुछ ऐसा बावले हट कर कुछ ऐसा बावले हट कर कुछ ऐसा बावले मीठा लागे गुड़ 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 बोलो कान्यो मान्यो बोलो कान्यो मान्यो बोलो कान्यो मान्यो बोलो कान्यो मान्यो।
एक्चुअली जेल नाम ही एक टेंशन है, बाहर वालों के लिए भी और अंदर वालों के लिए भी, क्योंकि सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम होती है अपना केस डिफाइन करना, उसके बाद अकेलापन और फैमिली की तकलीफें। तो इन सब से जो आदमी स्ट्रेस में आ जाता है यहाँ पर, और स्ट्रेस की वजह से दूसरी प्रॉब्लम्स भी होती हैं।
बेसिक बात यहाँ ये है कि बंदी घुटन आक्रोश कब महसूस करता है, जब वो कोई अपनी बात रखना चाहता है, वो सही है या गलत है वो अलग बात है, पर वो कहना चाहता है कि मैंने अपराध क्यों किया या ये घटना क्यों हुई या इसमें मेरा कितना दोष है, उसको सुनने वाला कोई नहीं।
सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा।
जेल मुख्यतः एक बंद व्यवस्था की तरह इसका प्रयोग किया जा रहा है। अब धीरे धीरे इसमें सुधार आ रहे हैं। वस्तुतः जेलें ओपन होनी चाहिए, खुली होनी चाहिए। जितने बाहर के लोग जेल में आएंगे उतना ही सुधारात्मक प्रक्रिया को गति मिलेगी। जितना हम इसको क्लोज रखेंगे, जितना हम इसको बचा के रखेंगे, उतनी ही समस्याएं यहाँ आकर के आदमी और ज्यादा अपराधी बनेगा।
वसुधैव कुटुम्बकम् वसुधैव कुटुम्बकम्।
ये लास्ट एक साल से मैं देख रहा हूँ कि यहाँ काफ़ी अच्छी प्रवृत्तियाँ चल रही है। जैसे संगीत का चल रहा है, तो संगीत क्लास में तो हम 7-8 महीने से जाते हैं और वहाँ लोग अच्छी अच्छी चीज़ें सीख रहे हैं। दूसरी चीज़ है, सुबह में योगा चल रहे हैं, तो योगा से सबका स्वास्थ्य पे और मन पे एक अच्छी असर आ रही है। बाकी यहाँ कंप्यूटर चल रहा है और पेंटिंग चल रहा है और जैविक खेती का, तो उसकी वजह से क्या है कि एक हमको गुरुकुल जैसा लग रहा है, जेल जैसा नहीं लग रहा है कि यहाँ कुछ न कुछ सीखने को मिल रहा है।
और तुम्हारे हैं, तुम्हारे हैं। वसुधैव कुटुम्बकम् वसुधैव कुटुम्बकम्।
ज़्यादातर हम लोग लेबल में देखते हैं कि इंजीनियर है, डॉक्टर है, अपराधी है, तो उस मोमेंट में सारे लेबल ड्रॉप हो जाते हैं। When you see as a one everything, then you're able to share humanity, and that's really creating lots of possibilities.
और सबसे सुंदर जो गुरुजी ऐसा बोलते कि कोई भी अपराधी जन्म से अपराधी नहीं होता, उसके हालात, उसकी मजबूरियां या कुछ ऐसा समय जो उसे वो करा देता है, वो कोई जन्म से नहीं होता। तो उसमें ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन भी हो सकता है और हमने ऐसे देखे भी।
ये हवा, ये फिजा, ये नजारे, ये समा, ये हवा, ये फिजा, ये नजारे, ये
Yes, Anuradha. Thank you for taking the time to watch that. I can just say a little bit about it. This is a project we started 2 years ago. And for me, it was, I think I would say it's been very important part of my spiritual journey. And a very, very important part in the sense of, I don't know, I hope people have heard the story of Buddha and Angulimala. So there was a very famous story. I don't want to take all the time to tell it unless I have time, then I'll tell it. But anyways, it's basically Angulimala was a sadhu who became a thief and was with a curse to murder 100 people and cut their fingers off and wear it as a necklace. And Buddha went to meet him. And his presence actually helped to lift the curse and helped Angulimala basically find his right path and purpose of life again. And so I was very inspired by that story when I had first heard it. And so I wondered, could my going and many other noble friends going there, could we actually raise the vibration, the consciousness level, the field of trust and love, to actually see a kind of transformation. So that was, for my own tuning in and seeing what could be done. And also my own journey of questioning, my labels that I have towards people, my judgments, my fear. A lot of fear when I went to the jail the first time was it was very strong. And so even this whole journey of actually so many other things. And I think the experiment is really something, can we create another kind of educational model and reimagine what the prison is? I remember once hearing a story from many indigenous communities that when somebody commits a mistake, they're not sent out, they're not sent away, they're not discarded, they're not banished, but actually the community brings them closer and gives them more love and care. So I think that kind of healing is very much a part of this. And so this is an experiment, I think, to really see if we can explore Dharma in a very practical sense and a different kind of economic system there that we're trying to rebuild livelihoods with the inmates. And I just think the one thing also is that one of the essences of this project is to start with being able again to see the beauty and the power in each human being, and letting go of our judgments about good and bad and things, and really building something again with the deep beauty and spiritual power and creative power within human beings. So this is a effort with full love and that, with that all in mind. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Manishi, for this beautiful sharing with all of us. And from the comments, we can see how people are inspired to look at this whole, look at the world behind the bars very differently as well. So thank you for that. I'd like to request Prashant ji to share with us a little bit about the work that he's doing, because he's deeply involved in policy. And I think it ties in because a lot of what we've been discussing, especially on economics and politics, and everything is based on policy. So how do we work on policies that will create a better society, a more dharmic society? So if you'd like to share about Rashtram with us, that would be wonderful.
Thank you very much, Anuradha ji. So the whole question is, where does change begin? And what the founders at Rashtram, who are actually a very young set of social entrepreneurs, what they really thought about was that if we all be the change who we are, is one level of change, but how do we accelerate change in society? And one of the interventions that they have designed, and I'm very honored to be a part of that initiative that they have actually brought about, is that how do we create and transform leaders, emerging leaders for tomorrow in the area of social leadership, in the area of academia and political leadership, because that has an impact. A good teacher in school impacts generations of future human beings who go and contribute so positively. And we see the power of leadership and emerging leaderships, and if they're given the tools to analyze, to work, and they get supported, because these are hard decisions. There are emotional costs. There are relationships which get affected as you start pursuing Dharma. The pursuit of Dharma is never an easy path. And as the world kind of begins to heal itself, it needs to develop and cultivate leaders to be able to take the choices and help mitigate the transition that the world necessarily must go through. So the Rashtram program is at multi levels. We have long-term programs for people who want to kind of get immerse for a longer period of time. There are also shorter programs that actually come in, which are designed for specific areas, and they span Artha, they span wellness. We have a very well-established wellness practice which is coming up, and we are having a center for civilizational research, because civilization also is a mark of accumulated knowledge, and there is a lot of value in that knowledge. It's often discounted and trivialized in the measures of GDP, but a simple thing of washing hands or a ritual of coming back from a funeral and having a bath in water which is immersed with neem leaves, which is a part of a tradition, was a sign of accumulated knowledge that has value. So the Center for Civilizational Research is actually looking at saying that there's a validation and value to a lot of the civilization values, and we should kind of look at treasuring and kind of moving that forward. So there's a lot of work that's happening, and the university opens very shortly, and our first batch
Prashant, you got muted, I'm sorry. You were saying about the first batch. The
first batch joins in. We do because of the COVID, we do a virtual induction, and then we ease them into the campus, hopefully as things settle down. And we hope to create the leaders and who can help accelerate the changes that I think everyone here so unanimously agrees that the world needs.
Thank you very much. I must tell the participants that the Rashtram program and all are being run by the Vision India Foundation group. And they run a program of public policy for executives, which I had the good fortune of participating in. And I must say that it was an extremely enlightening experience. So if you're wanting to know more about policy, more about investing your life in trying to be a change maker, do look up the Vision India Foundation. They offer some wonderful programs, and I request Prashant ji to please put up the details for all our participants while I invite them to give the announcements, make the announcements for tomorrow's programs. Thank you.
Certainly, I will do that right away.
We'll come back to you for your actionable plans at the end. We'll come back after the message for your actionable plans. 3 things that you would like to suggest as actions for our participants. After the messages. Vinaya? Vinayji, may I request you to kindly make the announcements?
Namaste, and thank you Prashant ji, thank you Manish Jain ji for really a thought-provoking discussions that we had this evening. In fact, this is a conversation that we need to have again and again. So thank you very much for that. So with this, I'll go on to make the announcements for the next day. I request Srinivas ji to present us. So tomorrow morning, we have a practice session led by Ms. Neha Raka, who is a yoga and wellness coach and is also the founder of Iti Yoga. And the practice will focus on grounding with gratitude with special reference to the Mooladhara Chakra. So Mooladhara Chakra is associated with one's identity and grounding. So this whole approach, this whole practice will lead us towards that grounding with gratitude, focusing on Mooladhara. That would be the morning session. And in the noon session, we have, again an experiential session from Team Sunat, who will be presenting on Nritya Yoga and Wellness. In fact, those who could join us this noon, we saw the connection between Nada Yoga and Wellness presented by Team Sunat. And tomorrow, again, we'll have them, a different set of members from the same group, who will be presenting on Nritya Yoga and Wellness, focusing on 3 particular dance forms, Bharatanatyam, Odissi, and Kathak. And the artists will also share their experience of bringing in wellness to their own lives as they were exploring themselves through these dances. So we'll have Parul Shastri ji, Nandini Kamath ji, Elizabeth Matthews, Nishant Panikar, and Sharada Pai. So some senior and some young yet very talented artists will be joining us for this session. And in the evening, it's a highly promising session by Yogi Maheshwara ji, who is a researcher, a scientist in the Laboratory of Astrophysics in Marseille, who is also the trustee of Khechari Devi Ashram in France. He, by training, by education, he's an astrophysicist, but by his own inner calling, he was able to arrive into the experience of Khechari Mudra, which very few people can actually do it. And he's the one who can get onto that mudra and hold it for a long duration. And all he says was through an inner inspiration that he received and the inner initiation he received through various masters. So he will be with us tomorrow evening, and please join us for this really very interesting session. So with this, I now come back to our presenters, panelists of the day. But before that, I would also like to mention that all these sessions are being recorded and they are made available on Indica Yoga YouTube channel. So you may want to visit them. Even this session itself is not something that we listen to it once. We would really want to mull over what we have heard. So we might want to go back to these sessions again and again. And I urge you all to make use of all these resources available at your command. So it's for all of us, it's for the society. So please make use of it. Please share with all your friends who would be interested, and also stay connected with us and follow with us for the next 10-15 days that we are continuing the festival, which has now been extended up to 31st July, the end of this month. So with this, now I come back to Prashant ji and Manish ji with a request that as a parting message, could you suggest us 3 actionable points which all our participants can take home and bring it to their lives as to what could lead towards a conscious economy or a dharmic economy? Over to you, Manish ji.
So one action I would suggest is to start to think about growing some food at home. Growing some food, and around that, daily gratitude for the food that we receive, and also the talk to the plants every day. Give them some love when you're growing the food. So that's one action. The second action is talk, or you can sing, even better, sing to the plants. So we have bathroom singers. I would call us vegetable singers, or plant singers. Is a new way to grow the economy. The second thing I would say is to really look at where are your investments going? Where is your money sitting? The money that you have, whatever little or big it has, where is it being invested? Is it sitting in some bank going to support global corporations, or is it being invested into your own community, into projects and people you care about? That's the second thing I think you can do. And the third thing is, I think, as I said, really start to think about how to rebuild community. So community, when we say sometimes whatever the problem, community is the answer. So how do we rebuild communities again, healthy communities, friendships, trust in our community? And a very practical way to that is start to, we do a lot of games and fun things around little acts of kindness. So just sharing kindness with a stranger. We do something like, we have something called the Darya Dil Dukan, which is like, rather than giving away something that you don't need, try a spiritual act of giving away something that you love and you're attached to. Give it away to a stranger. So some of these things to build a field of trust, and that we know there are people out there to care for us and who are connected. We're all connected. We need to create reminders of this deep connection of life. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Manish ji. I'd like to request Prashant ji to please share 3 actionable plans for a participant.
Yes, and I propose very simple implementable plans. Essentially, if it's simple, it gets done. That's been the philosophy. I think the first thing is everybody owes it to their Dharma as they are themselves, because when they are healthy, they transfer this to others. So I think this starts with self-care. And the simplest thing, and one of the biggest things in terms of creating our own self-economy of or wealth and accessing our own internal subtle domains, is to breathe more deeply, more wholly, inhale and exhale, because every breath is a treasure of life and the prana shakti. It unlocks a lot of value and creativity as you engage in everything. And the third part I would want to say is that be open, because the difficulties that we face are actually opportunities which are disguised. So as we've all seen, the COVID problem, it is there and it's creating a lot of difficulties. But at the same time, there are incredible opportunities that present themselves if we choose to look at them. And I think fear is not the key. So if we breathe in and breathe deeply, we overcome that paralysis and that fear and start accessing the hidden true wealth and the artha that is inside us. Those are my three things for everyone.
Thank you very much to both of you, and to Swamiji, who was there with us, and to Dina and Marian and Hannah for having helped bring this platform, helped bring this session for all of you. I would just like to mention that through this global festival celebrating wellness, we are promoting the idea of having ambassadors of wellness. So please try and make these actionable plans as part of your ambassadorship, and try and nominate people in your community, in your networks, to take this forward, and ask them to nominate somebody else as well. So please see if you can start this chain of what Manish ji called the homo giftus in different ways. So can we start this positive light to spread around us? And one last thing I wanted to say as a linguist, it's very interesting that in Sanskrit as well as in the Indian languages, we do not have a verb to have. We only have a verb to be, which means that the consciousness at work, which underlies the yogic consciousness, was about, the focus was about who do you become, not how much do you have. And I think if we make that shift in our economy, focus on who we are and the difference we make by who we are, rather than how much we have, and become insecure about the little that we have and seeking more. I think that would be a very major move that can underlie this entire discourse that we have had here. So thank you very much once again. We look forward to the conference. I'm sure we will share this with Dina and Indica Yoga, and we hope that this discussion has only begun for all of you. Thank you. I'd like to request...
Thank you very much, Manish ji. Thank you, Prashant ji.
I'd like to request Srinivas ji to please put up the banner for tomorrow's program, and we'll all chant the Om 3 times at the end to allow these sounds to carry as far and wide as possible.
And also thanks to all our participants who have joined us and have stayed back from across the globe. They have joined us and they have been sharing their concerns. They have been sharing their compliments. They have really stayed connected with us. So thank you very much.